welcome to another episode of Jason's Game Room, the only podcast here on YouTube that talks about everything gaming, from board games to dice games to CCGs to video games. If it has anything in the world to do with gaming, it is going to be on this show and talked about, so you want to keep tuning in to see what's new. Now, today's show is about board games, and more specifically, it is about my favorite board game of all time, and that would be Risk, the game of global domination. And who doesn't like taking over the world now and again, right? Now, I've been playing since I was a kid, and my love of this board game was amplified through high school because in a class I took in grade 12 called Urban Geography, one of our routines was to play this game all class every Friday. I don't know if it was as a reward or because it was teaching us things, but at the same time it was great to play it and get more involved with it, and it was a lot of fun. Years afterwards, I bought my first Risk board, which was the original style board that had the old pieces that looked like star-shaped things in different colors. Somehow, that board, it was in pristine shape by my dad, got lost during the course of one or two moves. I honestly thought that I stored it at a relative's house, but I can't seem to find it to this day. That led me to buy the newer Risk board about 6-7 years ago that has the individual pieces, like the single soldier for a single army, horseback rider for 5 armies, and the guy with the cannon for 10 armies. So the more detailed pieces. The game is still the same. It is all based on world domination. It's a lot of fun. I love my Risk game. I try to play it a few times every winter with friends. But there's a lot of people who ask questions about Risk, and aren't as keen to play it because they think it's a hard game. Now, Risk is not an easy game. It takes a lot of strategy, and you also have to pay attention with what's going on with your opponents. You're all fighting over the same continents, and you're trying to gobble up as much territory as possible and then expand, wage war against your opponents, and eventually take over the whole map. And people have asked me over the years, since I'm an avid player, what's the best continent or region to take over in order to further the world domination aspect of the game. Now, you have to remember when you start the game, the deck of cards is dealt out for your starting territories, and you go from there, and then you start taking over through rolls of the attack and the defense dice and whatnot, and you move your armies into place. My strategy, and a lot of people are going to look at this and go, what? But my strategy has always been to try to take over Europe first. The reason for this is Europe is an essential part on the planet in real life, and in more specifically in Risk. It is strategically valuable because you're next to Asia, you have jumping off points into Africa, you have a jumping off point into Greenland, which gives you access to North America, and if you can move your forces from Western Europe into that North Africa zone, you now have a jumping off point to Brazil and South America. This is why I always prefer to take over Europe first, because it gives me more options. Now, I've played against opponents who prefer to take over either North America or Asia first, mainly because of Asia's size, and when you start building up your armies, it's harder to attack if you're an opposing force. And I've also had a friend who always goes for the Australias and Indonesia and all that first. But I don't like going after the Australia region in the map for the express purpose that there's only one jumping off point, and that goes straight to Asia. And if your opponent's already controlling most of Asia and you're trying to come in with a small force from the Australian zone, it doesn't work out very well for you. And I've noticed this. There have been times when I've been playing and I've started off having Australia, and trying to get into Asia is a bitch. So it's not my favorite region to go after. And at least with Asia, you can jump off into North America and try to go in from that way or go across Europe. But when you start off as attacking from Europe or taking over Europe, you have a lot of options. You don't necessarily have to go all in on Asia. You don't necessarily have to go all in on Africa. And it's certainly strategic to have Greenland, because that puts you on equal footing between Europe and North America. Now, some people will say that it's based on luck and rolls of the dice and not so much the warfare. I disagree Because when you're building up your forces, it has everything to do with warfare, because if you have enough garrisons in one region and your opponent is trying to get that region, it's either going to take him a long time to try to take that over, or he's not going to be able to do it at all. Hence, owning a continent of strategic value, which makes it even harder for someone to take it over. Now, that's about the only good thing about the Australian region. If you build it up, nobody can get in there and really hurt you, but it takes longer to get out of. Same with anyone that takes over South America, and I've seen a friend do this time and again where he's focused on South America, but you only have one jumping off point towards Africa, and then you got to fight your way up into North America. If you don't have enough armies built up or garrisons, then what is the point? But that's the beauty of Risk. It's a multifaceted board game, many options, and in terms of overall strategy, it's tough, because I've played in games where myself or a friend of mine, believe it or not, have gotten down to only 2 or 3 countries or areas, and we fought back to take over half the map and then ended up either losing or winning. It's that kind of a game. It could go either way at a split second, depending on your opponent's strategy or what he has left or what you have or what you're building up. It's not something that's the same every time you play. And normally I've played against 2 other opponents. I've played groups of 3. I've also played groups of 4 or 5. I don't think I've ever done 6. But groups of 4 or 5 even add a new dynamic into the game. So it's really the sky is the limit for strategy, depending on how many people are playing. Now, if you're only playing one-on-one, it's going to be a much longer game. A standard round of Risk can go anywhere from an hour to 3 or 4 hours, and that's not exaggerating. I've played in games that have gone that way. Back in high school, in that grade 12 class, when we played on Fridays, we played games that were over before the bell rang to switch classes or go to lunch, or games that we would write down and resume, so that when the next Friday came along, we'd just pick up from where we left off. Now, that's a pain in the ass to record that, but it was fun to do that because we just didn't want to end the game where it was. We wanted to keep going to see how far we could take it. And believe it or not, we had one game. I believe I played against Nick and Kirk, and it went 3 classes. So you can imagine that was a long game. So an hour and a quarter class times 3. You know, that's almost 4-hour round of Risk. And like I said, I've had some that have lasted an hour or less because there's been a quick global domination by one player. It's just the way it goes. If you've never gotten into Risk and you want to get into Risk, it's not an expensive board game. You can pick up the standard game for around $30 from a toy store or a game store, depending on where you go. I prefer Toys R Us only because their selection of board games is awesome and their prices are pretty good there. You might be able to find Risk at Walmart from time to time. I have seen it there. It will be maybe $1 or $2 cheaper, but not every store will have it. And if anyone knows anything about Walmart, their selections are weird from store to store. It's really strange how that works. So my best bet, as I said, is to go to Toys R Us. You can order off Amazon too, but you're going to be paying shipping charges. For sure, Toys R Us has it. The highs, the lows, and the downright dirty. I'm going to do that for this show because the Risk does have that. As far as the highs, there's a lot of highs for Risk. It's fun. It could really get your world domination juices flowing. As I mentioned earlier in the show, multiplayers up to 6 players. So you can get your whole family involved if you don't have any friends to play with, as sad as that may sound. The action is relentless. You don't know what's going to happen next. And again, a game can go from an hour to 4 hours. So it's a mixed bag of what's going to happen. It's always a lot of fun. And I recommend playing it if you don't want to get into something that's too rules heavy or too deeply involved in any kind of story that would take a long, long time. Because there are some board games, if you play K10 or Stratego and you're going 4 or 5 hours, or Nobody wants to do that sometimes. You want to have a quicker game, but not too quick. The lows, as much as the length of the game would be a high, it's also a low if you have a round that starts going past 3 hours, because unless everyone's deeply into the game, because it'll seem like it went by quickly, if people are starting to get frustrated, that's when the game starts dragging, because people start rolling their eyes and tossing cards and just shaking their head. So that's why you want to have more than 2 players. You want to have 3 to 4 is the happy balance, because you'll have a good war that way and the game will go well. If you only have 2 people, it's going to take a hell of a long time to get through that game. And if you have I think if you have a full game of 6 people, that could go either way. But again, I've never played with 6 people. The other low, and this is silly, but one of the other lows is the little plastic pieces. You have to make sure you don't lose them, because you need every one of those little army pieces. And because I have OCD, everything is in my game box and it stays there. And I know, and I count them from time to time. So be careful with those little pieces. You need them, and don't lose any of the dice. As far as the downright dirty, I don't see a downright dirty to do with this game. Anything. I mentioned the highs and the lows, and that's about it. There's really nothing downright dirty to complain about Risk. It's an all-around, it's a great board game. And I encourage everyone, if you've never played Risk, to get out there, get a board, play with your friends, and experience Risk. You'll have a lot of fun. Anyways, that's all I got for today's show. There's only so long I can go on about Risk. I mean, I could take you through some of the rounds I've had, but nobody wants to hear that. So, everybody have a great day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this channel. And keep tuning in for new content on gaming. Have a great day, everybody, and game on!